Welcome back to Talking Sports with Brandon. This is the Week 18 recap video. My camera wasn't working, so that's why you're not going to be seeing video for this video. But hopefully, that by the time the next video comes out, hopefully the camera is working again. But no bother, no problem. So uh, obviously week 18, the last week of the season. This was the week where we knew who was going to make the playoffs, who was going to miss the playoffs, and we had some exciting finishes. In some winner take all games. We also some teams that probably most people picked to make the playoffs didn't make the playoffs. So we're gonna talk about all of it. And then for the next video is going to be me filling out my playoff bracket and obviously talking about the games that are happening that week. So for this one, we'll start with my 5 picks. Again, the last 5 picks of the season. I said I wanted to end off on a good note. There was a possibility of going a possible 5-0 or 4-0-1 with a tie in there, of getting to 500 or above 500. That obviously did not happen because my final record for the season is 41, 47, and 3. I went 2-3 this past week. I've been saying it all season, but it just was not a good season for me week by week. I think I don't even know if I went 5-0 one week, maybe one week, but I don't even think I did. I think my best week was 4-1, or maybe I went 4-0-1 one week. I think I did that. But most of the weeks were 2-3, 1-4. I don't think I ever went 0-5, but it was mostly 2-3s or 1-4s, and it's not going to cut it. So disappointing week, disappointing season in terms of the picks. Again, last year I was 18, 17 games over 500. This year I'm 6 games under. So, we'll talk about it this week though, and then hopefully for next season we're back on the same track we were last season. But I guess we'll see. But for this week, I wanted to include 2 games that had the stakes of winner take all. One of them was guaranteed. The other one was potentially going to be that, depending on how Sunday played out. And it kind of was like that. But the first game was the guaranteed winner take all game, where winner makes the playoffs, the loser misses the playoffs, and that was Titans Jaguars. I took the Jaguars -6. They ended up winning 20-16, so obviously did not cover. And to be honest, I mean, the Titans had a really good chance of winning this game. They were winning this entire game with Josh Dobbs starting at quarterback again with his audition last week against Dallas. He won the job over Malik Willis. I think Tennessee was just hoping that he was going to win that job, and obviously he did. And he played good again. I mean, he really did. I mean, for a guy who has been in the NFL for a couple of years but never started, only threw 17 passes or something like that in the NFL up until his start last week. Short notice with the team, really hasn't had that many reps. Now for this week, he had more reps because they played Thursday, did get reps with the first teamers, but even still, it's you'd been there for 2 weeks basically, and he still played pretty decent. I guess the one mistake was the final touchdown of the game, which won Jacksonville the game, and that was he just was in the pocket, pressure was on him, didn't really feel it, and gets sacked, but more importantly loses the ball, and the Jaguars pick it up for a fumble recovery for a touchdown. So that's what made it 20-16. That came with 2 minutes and 51 seconds left in the game, and that was all she wrote. That was the game. So again, they were winning the entire time. They were up 10-0 early, 13-7, 16-10, 16-13, all the way up until that point in the game where, again, it's 8 minutes left in the fourth quarter. They're starting at their 10-yard line. They move it all the way up to their 35-yard line in 9 plays, and they only went 25 yards, which took 5 minutes off the clock. So they were just wasting clock. That's all they wanted to do. You're only up 3 points. You want to waste as much clock as possible. Despite the way that Dobbs, had been playing, which was, again, decent enough. You knew that you needed to just waste as much clock as possible because you're not scoring again. You need to give them as little time as possible. Despite Lawrence not having a great game, you know what their offense can do. And again, it's only a field goal, so they get inside the 35. That's almost a guarantee of a 3 points right there. So you got to give them as little time as possible and the worst field position for them as possible. So 3rd and 6 at the 35-yard line. Again, 2:51 left. I'm not even sure if Jacksonville had used their timeouts. They at least had one. I'm pretty sure they had at least two. But it's 2:51 left, 3rd and 6. They're going for the first down. I obviously agree with that. You got to throw for it on this down. Trying to, again, extend the clock even more because then you make them use their timeouts. More clock goes off, and you get even better field position to punt from. So, he drops back in the pocket. It was close. It could have been an incomplete pass, could have been a fumble. They ruled it fumble on the field. After the replays, it did look like a fumble, but if they called incompletion on the field, I could see them sticking with that. It was very close, but again, they called fumble on the field, and it was a clear return and recovery by Jacksonville. So that's what won them the game. Again, Lawrence wasn't great in this one. I think the way that he'd been playing these last basically 2 months had kind of shown that he'd taken that step, and I still believe he has, but he just wasn't spectacular this game. Definitely missed a couple throws. Didn't make mistakes, but missed a couple throws where they could have had way more points than 13. Basically, because the defense had 7 of those, and definitely could have made a bigger impact. But still, kind of his first ever playoff game. This was a playoff game essentially. Gets the win, and now they play the Chargers next week in the wild card round. So. Again, we're going to talk about those games later in this week, but definitely an impressive win, despite it not looking pretty and losing the entirety of the game. It was still impressive because Tennessee, no matter what the talent is, no matter who's on the field for them, they're always going to be tough, and that's exactly what this game was. They had no really right to win this game just because they were outclassed and out-talented by Jacksonville, but that's just how they play. They play tough, they play physical, and they're always going to be in it. And if they don't make that one mistake, they're probably winning this game and playing the Chargers in the wild card round. But that was a loss. So 0-1. Ravens, Bengals. This one was an easy pick for me. It got a little bit closer towards the end, as you probably would have thought, especially how it kind of started. But Bengals win 27-16. Now, the rules for this game was that let's say the Ravens won. If the Ravens won this game, they'd be 11-6, and Cincy would be 11-5. So they would have, because that Cincy Buffalo game obviously got canceled last week. This game would have been, if the Ravens won, it would have been determined by a coin flip, because they still would have played in the playoffs, because the Chargers, it wouldn't matter. Chargers and Baltimore would have the same record, but Chargers had the tiebreaker. So the Chargers were always going to be the 5 seed. The Ravens were always going to be the 6 seed. And obviously, with them both having 11 wins, but the Bengals having 5 losses, the Bengals technically would win that division. So they would still play in the playoffs, the 3 seed and the 6 seed. And instead of it being just a home game for Cincy, if they both had 11 wins, it would be determined by a coin flip who would be the home team. So it could have been Baltimore, and it could have still been Cincy. But obviously, we never even got to that point because Cincy won the game. So Cincy's going to host Baltimore in the 3-6 matchup in the AFC. But that was a possibility that could have happened. If it did happen, imagine Baltimore getting a home playoff game despite being a 6 seed. That would have been crazy. That's something I'm not sure we've ever seen before, but again, it didn't matter. Cincinnati got out to a big lead. They're up 17-0 early. Again, it seemed kind of like a blowout. They were like, the Bengals are a way better team. Lamar, didn't play this game. The Ravens were kind of resting guys, to be honest. It was 24-7 going to half, 27-10 middle of the third quarter. And then ended up being 27-16. But the Ravens kind of were moving the ball a little bit. They definitely had chances to kind of score. So if they could have capitalized on 1 or 2 of those opportunities, like who knows what could have happened. It could have been a little bit closer. I'm not saying they would have won, but it definitely would have been closer. But yeah, Bengals took care of business. Again, they covered this point spread, so that was a win for me. And like I said, they're the 3 seed, Ravens 6 seed. That game, which is Sunday night actually, is going to be in Cincinnati, as it should have been. So that was the second game that I picked. Third game, Texans-Colts. Now, this was the one game when I talked about it, I said all the other games had implications of seeding or making the playoffs. This was the one that obviously it didn't. And, the Texans, they actually won this game 32-31. So, again, I had them plus 2.5. They obviously covered. They won the game. and it actually knocked them out of the 1 seed. So that's the biggest story of this game, and maybe even the week, to be honest. They're very close to the top, is that they lost themselves the 1 seed. And I think this is all the Texans' fault. We had a couple more coaches fired, which we'll talk about. And one was their coach, Lovie Smith, the Texans coach. And this had to have been predetermined, pre-known by him that he was going to get fired. It was only a couple hours after this game that it was officially announced he was fired, but it was definitely known he was going to be fired. I think people kind of knew that anyways, and obviously we're not even in the building. So with him, having direct contact with the owner, he knew he was going to be fired, and he played to win this game. If he's not going to be here next year when they have the number 1 pick, what does he really care? Honestly, that's what I would do if I was a coach. If I'm not going to be here when we have the number 1 pick, and you guys clearly don't trust me or clearly don't believe in me, why would I purposely lose this game for you guys? And you know what? The last couple weeks, despite last week in Jacksonville they got blown out, but the weeks before that, they were playing teams really tough. The Cowboys last drive of the game, Kansas City OT, and this game they were all the way till the end. They had a big lead in this game too. I don't blame him at all for going for the win and saying kind of like screw this team. If you don't believe in me, I might as well just kind of ruin your chances for going into next year. Like I don't really care. And that's exactly what he did, because the only way that they weren't going to get the 1 seed was if they won and the Bears lost. And that's exactly what happened. Texans, again, they're up 17-7. Then they're up 24-21. Then they're down 28-24, down 31-24. And with 50 seconds left in the game, after converting, I think, 2 4th and 10 pluses on the final drive, they get a 28-yard touchdown drive, 28-yard touchdown reception, which I believe came on 4th down. Yeah, 4th and 20, they get a 28-yard touchdown. Are the Colts trying to tank? What's going on? Because again, the Colts are 4-12-1, so they have a top 4 pick, I think it is, top 3 pick maybe, but then not only that makes the score 31-30. They decided to go for 2, which in that moment I was even saying they should just go for 2. I kind of knew he was going to get fired anyways, but it wasn't confirmed at that point. I was just saying go for 2 anyways. Like, what do you really have to lose? Like, you win the game or you lose the game. And there was still 50 seconds left, so who knows what could have happened. But they go for 2. They get it. They go up 32-31. Colts didn't really do much. They got to basically midfield. But then at that point, they did just throw a Hail Mary. It was incomplete. But the Texans lose the first pick. And it's big news because the presumptive number 1 pick is most likely going to be Bryce Young, the quarterback from Alabama. And, the Texans need a quarterback. Obviously, they had Watson. He sits out a year, gets suspended, he leaves, whatever, all that happens. And he's obviously not on the team anymore. So they've been searching for a quarterback. And, this is the draft to get a quarterback. You have Bryce Young, you have CJ Stroud as well, you have a couple other guys. But if you're that number 1 pick, you're taking Bryce Young. And now, with them not having that number 1 pick, you don't think it's the worst thing, because if you're looking at it from an outer aspect, you're probably just thinking, all right, the Bears now have the number 1 pick, and the Texans are 2. All right, they're just 1 spot down, and the Bears, they kind of have a franchise quarterback, despite what personally I believe and a lot of other people is that I don't really think he's a franchise quarterback, but the year that he just had, it's hard to just kind of disregard that and then just take a quarterback right now. Personally, I don't like Fields that much. I think he's not a great quarterback. I think he's a running back, and he doesn't have a great arm, doesn't have great decision making, but that's just me. I guess we'll see what they decide to do. They still have a lot of time. I think they'll probably trade this pick, but that's where it comes into play, is that if the Bears just stick with Fields, which they most likely will, they can just throw this number 1 pick out to any team in the NFL. The Colts are a team that need a quarterback. Again, they have a top pick. There's a lot of teams that could jump up to get a quarterback. And that number 1 pick's right there. That means that the Texans are taking a quarterback. So if you can jump in front of them and get that number 1 pick, that guarantees you getting Bryce Young over the Texans. That's a huge thing to have. And for the Bears, a team that, again, if you go forward with Justin Fields, which they most likely will, they have a lot of other needs on that team. Trading a number 1 pick where, again, if this was a draft where there wasn't a quarterback who was the number 1 pick, you're not getting that much for this pick. But with a quarterback being the number 1 pick, you're going to get a lot for this pick. Teams are going to have to trade up. You're going to have to ask, you have a big asking price, and you're going to get a lot of picks. That's just what's going to happen. So with that, being said, that's really bad for Houston because despite Houston having, I think they have the 12th pick and the number 2 pick, you're not going to trade up. You're not going to trading those 2 picks to get the number 1 pick. So you're stuck at 2, and you should have to hope that no team jumps over you. Arizona's the 3 seed, Indy's the 4 seed, Seattle's the 5 seed. They're most likely going to keep Geno. Detroit's the 6 seed. Who knows? I mean, I don't see them trading up to the one spot to take Bryce Young. Because I think Goff has earned his spot there, but you don't know. You don't know because they haven't had that. Stafford was their franchise quarterback, but this is a really good chance of getting a really good quarterback at number 1. So who knows? But I don't think it will happen. But again, you cannot rule that out. Vegas at 7 most likely won't. Atlanta at 8, Carolina at 9. These are teams that possibly could jump up. So, with Houston now being that 2 seed, that was a huge win in a bad way. And for Chicago, you have to capitalize on this. You need a lot of draft assets back. You need to have a really good draft in this one. Wherever you move down to, whether it's a couple picks, whatever it is, you need to pick the right guy. You need to pick the best guys in the later rounds. You try to fill needs on this team, which is wide receiver, a lot of places on defense now that they kind of gave up on guys. Traded Roquan Smith this past season. So it was a huge turn of events there because we'll see what happens. See where Bryce Young goes. But yes, that was one of the biggest storylines in my opinion of the week. Moving on to the 4th game, Cowboys Commanders. I had the Cowboys -7. They got blown out 26-6. Offense was nowhere to be seen for Dallas. Washington, they just played great defensively, to be honest. I mean, Dak was awful, less than 50% completion percentage, 130, 1 interception. The run game was nowhere. It was domination, to be honest, by Washington. So that was obviously a loss. Not much to say, really. I mean, they just destroyed them. And I'll talk about it more on the Cowboys video, but just complete domination from Washington in this one. It's a good kind of going out party for them, but them obviously missing the playoffs. But they needed a week earlier. If they beat the Browns, if they played the Browns like this last week, Washington would probably be in the playoffs, but it was just a week too late. So that was a loss. And then final game, which again potentially had the makings of a winner go home playoff game. Lions Packers. It turned out not to be because the Seahawks beat the Rams in the 4:25 window to knock out the Lions from the playoffs. But to the Lions, it was basically like a winner go home game. I had the Packers -4.5. The way that they've been playing this last month, the defense had been really, really good. The offense had been doing just enough, but it's really the defense's play. And, in Lambeau, Rodgers against Goff, I'm trusting the guy who's going to the Hall of Fame. And I put my trust in the wrong guy, clearly. I mean, Rodgers was not good in this game. 17 of 27, 205, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Couldn't make the throws when he had to. They lose, like I said, 2016. Just didn't do enough. I mean, just did not play good enough. And his last throw at Lambeau, which potentially could be forever, who knows, or at least as the starting quarterback of the Packers, was an interception. So it was just a really bad game from him. Again, I think you had to ride with them. The way they won 4 straight games, the defense was insanely playing on that side of the ball, and Rodgers had been doing just enough to win these games. And you would have thought he'd kind of rise above and play really good in this situation. But you know what? You look at his playoff record and his track record in the playoffs and how he's played. It hasn't been great. And this was basically a playoff game. It was, you win, you're in the playoffs. You lose, you're not in the playoffs. And he didn't play good. He just hasn't. He's been the number 1 seed these last couple of years. Has lost at home in the playoffs. Can't beat these teams that he probably should beat. The Niners he can't beat. He loses to Tampa when Tom Brady throws 4 interceptions in that game. It's those games are at home. You have to win those games. So this one, another one, a team that didn't have anything to play for in terms of making the playoffs. All they wanted to do was knock you out, and they came into your building and knocked you out. So it's an embarrassing effort. It could be Rodgers' last start as a Packer. Definitely that speculation was coming out after the game. He just signed this huge contract, so it's very unlikely. But he kind of controls it, to be honest. If he does want to leave, he could definitely request a trade and kind of force his way out. But it'd be very tough with the money. But yeah, I mean it's all in him. He signed that contract. These discussions were happening last offseason, where it really looked like he was going to be gone, but he decided to stay. He got paid. He's making $50 million, whatever, this year, guaranteed money, and he signed that contract. He didn't have to. They lose Devontae Adams. He could have went somewhere else. He could have done something else. He didn't want to, and if now he were to turn around and do it again, that's just all on him. That's all his fault. There's no one else to blame but himself, really. But well, that's me a story to monitor for when the playoffs are over and we get into the off season. But yes, those are the final picks of the season. Again, 2-3, ended up with 41, 47, and 3 record. But now let's move into some other NFL news. So like I said, Lovie Smith got fired. Again, we kind of knew that, but it was confirmed. Another coach that got fired, Cliff Kingsbury. Again, another one where you kind of knew it was going to happen, but it wasn't confirmed until the other day on Monday. And for this one, he didn't. He had some decent years where they come out to the big start. They'd always collapse late, but it was always a matter of time. Like, I knew they were going to be bad this year, and they turned out to be bad 4-13. But even if they had a good year where they were fighting for a playoff spot, or they did make a playoff spot, he would probably still get fired, to be honest. I mean, that's basically what he's done these last couple of years, where he's been fighting for a playoff spot or made the playoffs, and they'd lose. They would most likely lose in the first round anyways. So, I would see them being fired no matter really what happened, unless they made a crazy run to like a championship game, which definitely was not going to happen, no matter how, what this team looked like. So that was definitely not unexpected. And with Kyler, they said he's going to be back for early next season, but personally, I don't know. We'll see what the coach is. They say he has a say in it, but I don't know when he's going to be back. It wasn't as bad of an ACL tear as some others. It was definitely on the lesser side, but you have to see what he looks like. You really got to be cautious about this. Like, can he come back next year? Yes, he can. And I think he most likely will, but at the same time, this is a terrible team. They're looking to trade DeAndre Hopkins in the offseason. I think that makes a ton of sense. You can get something back for him. He's just a trade candidate, to be honest. There's no reason to keep him at this point. They're probably going to get rid of some guys. J.J. Watt's retiring. There's other guys they can get rid of, kind of turn this roster over. New coach, new GM as well. They're going to want to put their kind of locker room environment into this place and kind of change and shake up what's been going on here these last couple of years. So I see a lot of changes coming to this team and this organization, and I don't know. I think Kyler will play next year, but at the same time, they own their first round pick. Is it really the worst thing to kind of be bad again and kind of give him some rest? I don't think that is. I don't think it's the worst thing. Can he play a couple of games? Sure, but this isn't a good team. There's no reason to get a really good backup for this team. There's no reason to try and win next year. I think you lose again. I think you end up at 4-13, somewhere around there again. Get a top 5 pick, and you hit on this year's pick where you have the number 3 pick, which means you're probably getting Will Anderson or Jalen Carter. That's the 2 best defensive players in the draft, potentially the 2 best players in the draft. You take one of those 2 guys. Or you take an offensive lineman. Whatever you do, you're taking a really, really solid player, and you need to hit on that pick. And then next year, I think you do the same thing. Get a top 5 pick and take someone who really bolsters your team at an offensive line, defensive line position. And there you go. You got 2 core guys for the future. Kyler comes back. You do make some changes. You free up some salary space, and you make the necessary moves. So we'll see what happens there. But that was another coach that was fired. In terms of anyone else getting fired, no one else yet. There's been talks about maybe Dennis Allen in New Orleans possibly getting fired. We have to see with some of the interim spots who gets hired there. That's not stuff we'll know for a little bit. But there could be some other ones, including maybe Brandon Staley if the Chargers lose in the first round, maybe Mike McCarthy if they lose in the first round. So there's definitely maybe some others that could happen, but for right now, those are the ones that we do know about. So, that was it for this week, though. We're going to talk about, like I said, next episode is going to be about the playoff bracket. We'll pick every single game, and we'll pick the Super Bowl winner, including final score, to see how close we do get. Again, it's kind of hard for me not to choose the teams that I already chose preseason. One, because they probably are the two of the very most likely teams to make it out. But I'll see if I change it up. Again, it depends on matchup. When I picked those teams, I picked Bills, Niners at the beginning of the season. I didn't know what seeds they'd be, what matchups they'd have. So it does change, but I don't know. Maybe I will pick those teams. But you'll have to watch the episode to find out. I thank you for watching this episode. Like I said, the camera, it wasn't working for this one. For that next one, hopefully it is, because, that would just be, that'd be way better to be able to see it. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.